Ela era uma garota normal que foi moldada em um manequim musical. Administrada em todos os aspectos, porque ela se libertou da produção de pop que a fez famosa e tomou as rédeas do que ela se tornou. Em 86, com apenas 18 anos, Kylie ganhou o papel de Charlene Michels na novela australiana Neighbours. Ela fazia o papel de uma garota mecânica de carros que namorava o galã Scott Robinson, papel de Jason Donovan. A novela fez muito sucesso, especialmente na Inglaterra, e Kylie e Jason rapidamente ficaram conhecidos.
If we just squint our eyes and use our memory, remember that sort of bob of frizzy curly hair?
The programme was massive. Kids used to rush home from school to watch it, and everybody had fallen in love with the idea of Scott and Charlene. And I think young teenagers and young kids really kind of believed it was a real world somewhere in Australia.
Of course, they gave her the best storyline, which was her romance with Scott, aka Jason Donovan, and their wedding, when it happened, was the second biggest wedding of the 80s after Diana and Charles.
O romance de Kylie e Jason nas telas continuava na vida real. O casal foi avisado por executivos do canal a manter o romance em segredo, por medo de influenciar o programa.
The producers wanted it to be fictional. They wanted the public and the audience to identify with Charlene and Scott, not with Kylie and Jason. Everybody guessed that they were having an affair. They were denying they were having an affair, and she was practically shacked up with him.
Apesar de Kylie querer publicar o seu romance, ela concordou em ficar em silêncio. Foi o começo de uma carreira e imagem pública estritamente controlada que iria dominar também a sua vida pessoal.
Inevitably, people saw them out together. I think as a couple they got increasingly frustrated. They wanted to tell the world that, they were together and they were in love.
I don't think it was manipulation. I think it was a great plan. I also think they probably enjoyed it because they were young lovers, and keeping it a secret probably adds a certain frisson to the whole relationship.
Os executivos logo perceberam que podiam lucrar com o relacionamento e em 88, como parte de uma estratégia de marketing muito bem planejada, o casal admitiu estar apaixonado com o lançamento do single Especially for You. Só na Inglaterra foram vendidos mais de 1 milhão de cópias.
Ironically, I think it was probably nearer the end of their relationship than maybe the people behind the record had perceived. It was a carefully managed and orchestrated relationship that had, limitless financial possibilities, I think, for the hitmakers behind the two.
Kylie tinha assinado um contrato com a gravadora Mushroom em 87, depois que o seu talento musical fora descoberto durante um concerto beneficente na Austrália. Ela cantou Locomotion. A gravadora lançou um single na Austrália ao mesmo tempo que Scott e Charlene se casavam na novela, o que rendeu o máximo de publicidade e um sucesso nas paradas. O potencial comercial de Kylie havia sido reconhecido e não demorou para ela ir até Londres conhecer os compositores Stock, Aitken e Waterman.
They forgot all about her, and she was actually in the office in London, and Waterman was away around the country, and nobody was there, we better do something for her, and they sort of wrote "I Should Be So Lucky" in a couple of hours for her, so that at least her trip wasn't wasted.
The thing about Stock Aitken and Waterman is they're very high street, they're very end of the pier. Everything they do is as common as muck, really. I guess buying into the fresh-faced girl from Sunshine, Australia was so high street that if there was even an ounce of possibility that there could have been a slightly upwardly mobile Kylie at that time, they completely rinsed that thought away and just sold her basically as kind of pop fish and chips.
It was pure hit factory stuff, fun music that would appeal equally to sort of 5-year-olds and 60-year-olds, and her image kind of matched the music really. It was light-hearted, frothy pop.
Kylie estava ficando famosa e lhe foi designada um empresário de nome Terry Blame. As táticas de Blame com a imprensa eram simples, mas eficientes. Quando Kylie foi da Austrália para a Inglaterra, ela foi fotografada no aeroporto toda desarrumada. No dia seguinte, todos os tabloides mostravam a foto e acabavam com Kylie. Blame vetou todas as entrevistas até que o incidente fosse esquecido, ensinando-lhe uma lição importante na administração da mídia e sobre a imperdoável imprensa britânica.
Terry Blamey is Kylie's manager, has been for donkey's years, right from the very start in Melbourne. He's always been in her corner, and he controls the image and how she presents herself to the world with a firm hand.
She's been in the public eye since she was, like 17, 16, something like that. And I think she treats every encounter with the press, for instance, like it's a learning process.
So when this happened at Heathrow, they did the smart thing. They said, OK, we're going to make sure you get photographed. We'll play their game. We'll make sure, if they want pictures of you, we'll make sure they're the pictures that we want as well. And they kind of do deals, don't they? That's how it works. They say, if you want a picture of it, can you wait 10 minutes? You'll get the picture.
Kylie Minogue understands that's a fair deal. If we cross over the edge, you know, Kylie's got a simple answer for us. You won't get a picture.
O jeito de Kylie lidar com a mídia mudou quando ela conheceu um estranho admirador que a cortejava desde a turnê no Japão em 89. O líder do In Excess, o rebelde Michael Hutchins, parecia ser a antítese do pop feliz de Kylie. Não demorou para a curiosidade de Kylie tomar conta e ela deixou o loiro da novela pelo charme sedutor de Michael.
She was the soap bubble, literally. She was clean and white and pure and virginal. And that doesn't get you very far in sort of terms of pop or any kind of longevity. She needed something else to happen.
Sooner or later, something's going to give, unless you're Cliff Richard or some kind of automatron. And eventually, you're either going to get really into crack or you're going to shag an Australian rocker in leather trousers.
There had to be some point along the way where, metaphorically, she lost her virginity, if you like. She became something else. She became darker. The character became more complicated. So it was inevitable, in a way, that along the way she would meet some kind of dark prince that would roughen her up.
She looked like a woman who was kind of having sex for the first time and, you know, really kind of enjoying thinking about herself as a bit of a sexy vamp type creature. And really, she didn't have to say anything about it because it was kind of written all over her face.
Kylie estava aproveitando uma nova maneira de ver a vida, longe da fórmula imposta por Stock, Aitken e Waterman. Ela se deleitava com a reação do público ao seu romance. Em 90, ela foi mais longe, mostrando um novo e drástico visual na premiere do filme Os Delinquentes. Pela primeira vez, ela tinha manipulado a sua imagem para atrair a atenção do público.
It was her 14-year-old phase. Everybody goes through that, the kind of bratty teenage thing. Maybe she went through it about 5 years after everybody else because she'd been in a very kind of controlled environment. And you know, like, if your whole image is of being the girl next door, you must be dying to do something a bit raunchier. So she ends up going out Michael Hutchins.
Without a doubt, whoever is in control of Kylie herself, her assistants, would have exploited that moment to turn her into a much more grown-up figure, if you like.
And the whole good girl turn bad thing is something that's worked in pop music for time immemorial and always will. And Kylie is one of the few people who's managed to do it on a cyclical basis. She's gone good girl then bad girl then good girl and bad girl, and the public keep lapping it up and forgetting that she's done the same stunt a million times.
Michael Hutchins ensinou Kylie como jogar o jogo da fama e a lembrou que ela tinha que estar no controle da sua própria imagem. Com isto em mente e livre das restrições que controlaram sua relação com Jason, Kylie gostava de ser honesta com a imprensa sobre sua nova vida de sexo, drogas e rock and roll.
She slipped up a couple of times with the press, and there were stories of her drug taking, and, you know, knowing what one knows now about Michael Hutchins, you can only imagine the sort of things that she was up to.
There was some decadence that went on, but no more than anyone else was doing at that period of time. But just because it was Kylie, it seemed to be more interesting to people.
Perhaps she wasn't being that naive. Perhaps she kind of leaked it accidentally on purpose because it just linked in with her, you know, carefully stage-managed good girl going bad spell.
A relação de Kylie e Michael sofria com a programação das turnês e terminou no final de 91, depois que Michael foi visto com a modelo dinamarquesa Helena Christensen. De repente, Kylie estava sozinha. Seu contrato com Stock, Aitken e Waterman não foi renovado e seu público tinha crescido e se afastado. Kylie finalmente estava livre, mas como ela iria lidar com esta liberdade?
I don't think Kylie necessarily lost her identity when she split up with Michael, but I think she was given sort of this newfound freedom to discover what her identity was.
Her image became a lot more kind of on the edge, a lot more fashionable, a lot less mainstream, and it actually wasn't a big success commercially because of all of those things.
I think working with the Manics, I think there was a moment where one of her songs didn't even get into the charts. This would have been very, very scary for someone like Kylie. She had to sacrifice one kind of audience in order to get the kind of integrity that would enable to be around for a long time.
Considering she was singing songs about kind of death and roses with, you know, relatively unknown characters like Nick Cave, she actually did quite well. So, you know, I think now we can kind of look back on that and see that the Kylie that then transpired couldn't really have happened without that deconstruction phase.
I don't look at it as reinvention. It's just a change. It's progression. It's growing older and learning about myself. I've got, you know, hopefully a long time ahead of me to keep learning about myself and what I think of the world and how I fit in.
Durante os 5 anos em que ela esteve com a gravadora Deconstruction, somente com Find Me ficou entre as 10 melhores. Em 96, pela primeira vez em 8 anos, ela não lançou nenhum disco. Kylie estava no fundo do poço e quase matou seu personagem pop. Mas um encontro com os executivos da Parlophone em 99 fez surgir a possibilidade de uma volta por cima.
Put it and go with Parlophone, which is an extraordinarily sophisticated pop machine. Sort of elevated Kylie to the level she should be at. You know, working with very clever Imagineers, if you like, pop fantasists, rather than the slightly low level, either the grubby level or the slightly nerdy level at Deconstruction.
The reinvention of Kylie was really just a throwback to her old image, but a much raunchier one.
She knew the way to come back was by making records that were about pleasure. Her pleasure and therefore everyone else's pleasure. They were about happiness and delight. But they now had a darker shadow to them. There was something, they weren't silly and frivolous and end of the pier and high street because she'd gone somewhere else.
What she did when she signed to Parlophone was really take advantage of her looks, and there's that famous shot of her in the gold hot pants that, you know, you can now see her in Madame Tussauds. It became iconic, and she played on her best asset, her bum, and that's, for years, was what she was famous for, was the best bum in show business.
William Baker, seu estilista e amigo, teve papel importante na sua reinvenção. Baker foi responsável por fazer ela usar os shorts dourados e suas criações eram inspiradas por diferentes eras. No começo, ele usou as pin-up girls dos anos 40 de modelo e ensinou Kylie como pousar, arqueando as costas e contorcendo o corpo para mostrar as suas curvas perfeitas.
You have to give a lot of credit to William Baker, who's been Kylie's stylist on and off for the duration of her career. And what William Baker has this incredible talent of doing is tapping into trends and creating these iconic images. And one of the reasons that Kylie has been so successful is these really, really powerful images.
When you talk to William Baker, he's kind of defensive about Kylie. He gives the impression of knowing her better than most people. He always kind of hints at the hidden depths of Kylie. And I think he feels it's his job to not just be a stylist to her, but to kind of put across the various images and the sides of her personality that he's had access to that perhaps the rest of the world haven't.
William and Kylie, he calls her Minnie and she calls him Willie. So that says it all, doesn't it, really?
William Baker tinha descoberto a melhor parte de Kylie e o seu bumbum empinado deixou a imprensa em frenesi.
You cannot do an interview about Kylie without mentioning those gold hot pants spinning around, girl or guy, you're just glued to the screen. I remember when it came out. And apparently her stylist picked them up for 50p in some thrift store.
The slogan would have been, Kylie, have you forgotten how hot she is? You know, that's what that video screamed out. It was a brilliant single. It was, you know, it wasn't quite the sort of edgy dance music she'd experimented with a few years previously. It was much more sort of brilliant, straight-ahead disco music.
I worked on the Sun newspaper at the time that the gold bottom arrived, and we dedicated pages and pages of newspaper to the gold hot pants and Kylie's bottom.
There were a lot of rumours that it was Botox, you know, but, you know, again, as I've said before, she, you know, 5'2", you know, there's not much gravity left for things to drop. She kind of became a sex symbol, but in a good way.
It became almost an enigma on its own, and I think I'm right in saying that once a front page was dedicated to just Kylie's bottom, and that's something that not many other people can say they've achieved, and it is a fantastic bottom, you've got to say.
A seguir, Kylie anda na corda bamba da fama para conseguir o máximo de exposição.
It's not as if men can actually imagine they could be engaged in a sex act with Kylie Minogue. She's there to be admired.
E se salva com o mínimo de escândalo quando a sua vida amorosa foge de controle.
Lurid kiss and tell on Kylie Minogue is just about the greatest slice of tabloid gold you could possibly want.